Obama's fiscal policies, the latest Stiglitz article, is that good people with good minds who have thought deeply about how, in fact, you develop a global economy understand very well that markets either do not work or work too slowly to provide the distribution of goods and services that come anywhere near an equal standing in the world as relates to food, a vehicle for dealing with the eradication of hunger, as relates to medicine and medical supplies having to do with health, as relates to births having to do with population, and the like around the world. And when confronted with this data, as we have been today by Barry through the Economist Data Bank, Stiglitz is basically saying to all of us, look, if you want to think about international economics, you cannot ignore that over at least decades, if not centuries, we continue to have this maldistribution, and we continue to play this game where there are more severe now today, winners than losers than any time before, and yet we think we are making progress, another values-laden word that goes along with capitalism and markets. But how can I, Joe Stiglitz, or any of us in this class that just raised their hands, believe that progress can be represented alone by more and more acutely defined markets, better trading, greater return on capital, if in fact it does not result in better health, food, population, and the like, as Barry has demonstrated here. So Stiglitz is now saying to Larry Summers, look, enough of this, we're just going to put the money out there and let the markets basically determine the most efficient and effective way to deal with the money. We, in fact, probably have to take a stand as human beings as to what we believe life should look like. That's a heavy-duty thing, okay? That's a very heavy-duty thing. Now, what does that imply? What does that imply? Well, you may have noticed in the course of your life that not everybody agrees with you. Do we have unanimity in that? And in terms of the way the world has worked as relates to the distribution of scarce resources by and between competing entities, the major decisions addressing markets have been dealt with by what? The G7 or G8. I can never remember which it is, but G7, okay? And you may have noticed, as is the case when I used to be in the corporate world, being the CFO of an international company, I would sit in Kuala Lumpur in my hotel room, and as the G7 was meeting, you may not know it, but CNN has a whole Eastern television network that in fact, mullahs are TV announcers. You know, there's Muslims that talk on TV. You know, they have variety of all sorts of folks. I wish they showed it here in this country, who talk about the news and really know what's going on. And the issue is, as presented in other parts of the world, that what percentage of our population, our world population, is in fact Judeo-Christian, because it is the Judeo-Christian system, and back now to values, and their values that in fact define, they would say, what the G7 talk about or value. The number is something like 33%. Okay? So that leaves about 70% of the population who have values based upon being Hindus, Muslims, Confucians, Buddhists, and there's a whole other group of others, whose value system is as yet unintroduced into the notion that we have used for the distribution of scarce resources, i.e. markets, in the world. Now, that being the case, not if that is the case, but that being the case, we now have sought to open up the mechanism for thinking about redistribution in terms of our global economy to being a G20 or a G22, I'm not sure what the number is going to be, and therefore have greater representation of nation states, but also of ideology and belief systems. Okay? So the question will then become, if Stiglitz is right, and markets alone cannot be used to deal with the distribution of scarce resources by and between competing entities called nation states on a global basis, because it results in maldistribution, some really losing, some really gaining. And instead, he is now publicly introducing the notion, as he attempted to with the International Monetary Fund in terms of debt forgiveness and the like for countries around the world. If that occurs, what is the mechanism that we will use to in fact determine what value systems should in fact be used to determine when